Greg, thank you so much for joining me here today. On this podcast, as you know, we really try to answer one question, which is how can filmmakers make profitable films? How can they fund those films? How they can distribute those films? I think you've had quite a wide range of experience within the film industry, and I'd love to focus this talk a little bit on your equity crowdfunding campaigns, but also on all the other knowledge that you can share with us on how filmmakers can fund and distribute profitable films.
Yeah.
So perhaps let's start off with, could you just introduce yourselves? Let us know a little bit about what your previous experience is and also what you're currently working on.
Yes. Well, thanks for having me on. I had a pretty, like you said, diverse background in this industry. I didn't do the traditional path, which is usually more, especially in management. It's more like trainee agent, junior agent, all that path. I kind of just started my own company first in talent management, which was almost 10 years ago. So I started there managing actors. I obviously started small and like with a couple of actors, and then we grew it to at its peak we had 60 actors, and we ended up having people on series regulars on Apple TV, Netflix, and some of the networks. And then I did that for 10 years, and then end of last year I already started pivoting towards producing and film sales and all that type of stuff about 2.5 years, 3 years ago. But it was really end of last year that I decided to stop managing actors, and that I kind of fully switched to just producing and film sales, which is what I'm focused on now. We've produced our first feature-length film beginning of last year. That's in post-production now. That's a film with the creator of Final Destination. So that should be complete in a couple months and distributed then. And we actually crowdfunded for that one as well. So that was the first one that we equity crowdfunded for, and we'll get into that in a second. And then now I crowdfunded again for another slate of films, and I have one going into production now in December. But meanwhile, while I'm doing that, and because obviously production, it's a long path, and it takes patience because you're developing the script, you're getting attachments, funding, so any film takes a good while. So meanwhile, like I'm doing the film sales, which is my company Apollo Management International, and I kind of started growing that also about 2.5 years ago because I had a friend that just got a terrible deal distribution wise from someone, and just ended up making no money, which was crazy to me. So I was like, okay, let me look into this. So a friend asked me about 2.5 years ago for another film that they had. And I was like, well, let me take a shot at it. Let me see how it goes. Like, to me, it's just sales. I mean, how difficult can that be? And it didn't end up being that difficult. It takes a lot of effort. It for sure took a lot of effort, but I don't feel like it was any different than anything else I've done in terms of you're just selling and you're just trying to put as much effort as you can. So I ended up selling that one for a minimum guarantee, and then now kind of slowly grown to 5 films that we're currently selling. One that we're selling that's with J.K. Simmons that I'm excited about. I just sold that to a European territory that's gonna do 100 to 200 theaters for that one. So cool stuff happening, and I think to me, obviously it's having something besides production that's I'm also working on. But to me, I always wanted to be in control of the sales and distribution because I feel like so much of your success as a filmmaker obviously comes down to that. I think, especially nowadays with how the industry is, I think it's really difficult if you don't take a lot of stake into that, or at least take control over that. I don't think the time of just handing it off to someone and hoping for the best exists anymore. I think you have to be involved in the marketing, and you have to be somewhat involved with the sales and distribution, especially for indie films. So I think that was also a main motivator for me because I want to give my films the highest chance of success as well. So that's another motivating part for me. But then for the equity crowdfunding, that's definitely helped us a lot. I mean, it's funded the first film, large part of it, and it's now going to fund this second projects that are coming up. And I'm going to run another campaign soon for something in the new year. So I'd love to talk about that and kind of, I know your audience was interested in that. I'd love to talk about that, and also I'll share kind of mistakes that I think I made in the past, and even now in this last campaign that I think I can do better.
Yeah, I mean that all sounds really interesting and great, and I definitely want to do a deeper dive into equity crowdfunding. But I've got one quick question before we dive into that from your experience doing sales within film,
Yeah.
which is you must have a lot of conversations with a lot of distributors in a lot of different territories. And the questions that we always get is, right now, August 2025, can you share, what are the types of films that distributors are currently looking for,
Yeah.
in terms of, perhaps genre, budget ranges, themes, whatever it might be, and what are perhaps some films that aren't currently selling very well from what you're hearing from the distributors?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question because it's all the distributors kind of say the same thing, um, and for the most part, I'd say listen to it, but take it with a grain of salt. Because if you listen to solely the distributors, you're only going to make horror or action thrillers. That's basically the two genres that everyone's always like, yeah, that's going to sell well, or that's what we're looking at right now. But there was no guarantee of that either. And honestly, the movie I recently sold that did a couple of minimum guarantees was more of a romantic dramedy, even a little bit rom-com leaning, I would say. And that one did pretty well, and that didn't have like an A-list cast or anything like that. Like no one that that's that recognizable. Definitely working actors, and they have their own audience. Like I think they have 200,000-300,000 followers. So definitely like known to some people, but definitely not like where they tell you like, oh, get a name that everyone recognizes. So it wasn't anything like that, but the movie itself was really good. So I think at the end of the day, it's like I think dramas are really hard sells right now. I think that's the one genre that is incredibly difficult right now. Even in good movies, I'm selling one right now that's a really good film. It's got like 98% on Rotten Tomatoes, on almost 50 reviews, and it's really good, and still struggle to sell that one, which is surprising. But I think it's because right now they don't want to take they're very risk averse right now, and I think it's because no one knows what's going on exactly with the industry right now. They don't know like how's it going to go, what's the future going to look like. There's a lot of uncertainty in that way. So when there's a lot of uncertainty, people go with what they think is the safe option, which right now they feel like is horror and action thriller. And action thriller, I get that because it just translates well internationally because it's not so story or language dependent. Almost anyone can enjoy that with not even paying that much attention. So I think that's why it's just something that appeals to the most people. Um, but I think I wouldn't just say to people like, oh, make a horror movie or make an action thriller. Personally, I wouldn't love to make an action thriller. It's not really my genre. Horror I could do if it's like the menu type of horror. But I think you still need to make the film that you're passionate about, because it takes way too long to make a film to make something that you're just trying to get sales with. What I would do is especially if I'm doing a drama, even if you have a low budget, I would try to figure out, is there a way I can get a role in there 1 to 3 days of shooting? That's an interesting role. That's like a fun, interesting role for an actor to play, and try to get a name actor in. And that's one of the films, the one that I'm selling with J.K. Simmons. They did something similar to that, and they got him in there, and that was an indie film, and he loved the script and he loved the role. So I think seeing if you can do that is a good idea. I think if you're above 100K, I think it's worth doing that. I think it's really worth trying to put aside a role for a
Yeah.
name, just because it does get you in the door. And it does get distributors watching the full film because they're like, oh, this guy's attached. Let me take a look. And half the battle is just getting them to watch the full film. So I think that is something to pay attention to. But again, if you're like micro budget, you're under 100K, then it can be difficult. Then I would probably just try to make the best film possible. You have such a low budget that you don't even need to sell a crazy amount to do well. Um,
Yep.
and then the other thing that I would say is start thinking of marketing on day one. I think with indie film right now, unless you're getting like Neon or A24, some bigger distributor on board who actually does a lot of marketing, then everyone else is not doing that much. You know, they're not doing that much marketing. And even if you look on social media and you look at some of these, let's call them mid-tier distributors, it's not that they don't do a good job, but they just have a lot of films. They can't market one film that much. So if you go on their social media, they might have
Yep.
two posts about that film. That does absolutely nothing. So it's like it is up to the filmmakers at that point to market it. And it's funny. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and I get a lot of comments from filmmakers on things that I post, especially around this. And sometimes there are filmmakers that are don't like hearing that. They're like, oh, it's not my job to market it. That should be a distributor's job, and blah blah blah. And it's like, sure, in an ideal world, you know what I mean. But I don't think that's the case anymore. So I think marketing is super important. And look, you don't have to go crazy with spend. Like, obviously, if you can keep some money aside for it, that'd be great. But even just creating a lot of content for social media, like I'll give you an example. This film that we're rolling out in the next couple of weeks, we created 120 pieces of social media content that's stored in our Google Drive right now and ready to go. So once we start rolling that out, we're going to have a post pretty much every day for that film for what is it, 120 days. That's a lot. That's a decent amount. And then maybe some of those pieces will hit, because you don't know how the algorithm goes. But you need a lot. So to us, if we do that many, I do feel like we get sales out of that, and maybe some will, get bigger or go a little bit viral. That'd be nice. But we're pretty creative with it. And I think if filmmakers start looking at marketing as another creative thing that they can do, then maybe the mindset changes of like, this is something I don't really like doing. It's very businessy. I think it actually filmmakers could be amazing marketers for their films because they are creative, and they usually have really good ideas. So if they would put that creativity to marketing and just figuring out interesting ways to market their film for free with social media, and it takes a lot of effort. It does take a lot of effort, but maybe you spend a couple of weekends just creating a bunch of content, and then you're kind of set. And I think, to me, if I was an indie filmmaker that's starting with their first film, I would start doing that and thinking about that from day one. And who's my audience? You know what I mean? Who am I really trying to appeal to? So then, to circle back all the way to what you asked, even with genres and type of films, I guess if you can, I would try to figure out a film that you can zone in on an audience. Like, for us in December, we're shooting a tennis feature, right? So it is a drama, because I love dramas, and it's, even though it's not the most sellable genre, but you make what you love, I think. And but it's set in the tennis world, so it's its own niche. So to me, I have a whole plan, marketing wise, even influencers that I can reach out to, all these type of things that are so in that niche, that my goal is to get the tennis world people excited about it. If I can appeal to them, that's a pretty big niche. So that's kind of, I guess, my advice is yes, if obviously if you love horror and action thriller, great. Those are good genres right now. Um, if you don't force yourself to make that film. Then make what you want to make, but think about these other things that I mentioned about 1 to 3 day roll if you can, if you're super micro budget or whatever budget you're at, planning your marketing and going all out with the marketing and creative. I think then you can stick out, and I think you have to, because most people aren't doing that. Like, even now, like, I usually log on and I see Instagram. It's very rare that I see filmmakers doing a lot of marketing for their film.
Yeah, I cannot agree enough with the fact that most filmmakers don't like marketing because they think that's the business
Yeah.
element and the business side, whereas actually marketing is the creative side. Marketing is all about telling a story that will reach an audience in a certain way. It's really just a
Yeah.
film, but in smaller doses. Um, so I do think filmmakers could be absolutely incredible marketers if they get out of their head that marketing is business rather than the fact that it's actually the creative. But yeah, there's so much useful advice there that you gave.
No,
So thank you for
I
sharing
love,
all that.
I love what you're
Yeah.
saying there. I think you're right. Like filmmakers, I think could be way better marketers than some of these business people that some of them don't have a lot of creativity. And you can see that with ads and stuff like that. So I think filmmakers could do amazing if they put their mind to it and kind of let go of that. Oh, I'm not a business guy. I'm a creative. It is creative. And then, if you need extra motivation, the better your film does, the longer your career is going to be if you're doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, most filmmakers are right now going, right, great, marketing, distribution, yes, but first I need to get that funding. And for that, I'd love to dive into the equity crowdfunding part. And really, I want to discuss two separate topics here. I'd love to discuss what it takes to set up an equity crowdfunding campaign from a legal financial point of view. What is it that you really need in order to set that up? And then from a marketing point of view, once that's set up and you hit that live button, because that's probably a little bit more complex than an Indiegogo or a Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah.
But once you click that, that publish button, how can you then market it correctly so that you actually get those investors? So let's perhaps start off with, can you tell us a little bit about the two crowdfunding campaigns that you've done, how much you've raised for those, and if you can, briefly talk a little bit about what filmmakers need before they launch an equity crowdfunding campaign.
Yeah, I think first there's a couple of sites that do equity crowdfunding. There's Wefunder, there's Start Engine, and there's Republic. I believe there's others too, but those are pretty much the top three. I haven't used Republic or Start Engine yet. I definitely want to do that at some point. But I've used Wefunder primarily right now. And the movie we did last year, we raised 126K, and then this year we raised 83K. To me, like, I still think we can do much better, and I'll go into that in a little bit and how I think in this next campaign I can beat that, because my goal in the next one is to get to 300K. So I'll get into that and mistakes that I feel I made, and so maybe that'll help as well. But in terms of the legal paperwork, I think that's important to talk about, because I think sometimes filmmakers get scared of stuff like that, and they're like, it's a lot of paperwork, it's complicated, and all that type of stuff. WeFunder makes it pretty easy, in the sense that you can literally start a campaign, and the first 50K, you can start reaching out to people and get what they call interest into investing. It's not an official investment yet, but it's interest in investing. And if you get to 50K, at that point, you are required to fill in the rest of the legal paperwork. But it is a good way, if you're not sure or you want to test it out, to kind of get your feet wet and kind of get it going and see what the interest is without even filing any paperwork and having to worry about all that. So like I would probably recommend that, or at least get like 20K, 30K, at least get interest first. And if you're doing your campaign and you're like, okay, I'm getting 20, 30K, then I would say, yeah, start preparing your legal paperwork. It looks like you're doing pretty well already. And then WeFunder helps you a lot in the sense that they have an account manager for your account that will literally email with you, talk you through everything that you have to get in order. But obviously the basics is that start an LLC for your film. That's pretty basic. You have to do that anyway. So I mean, you should. So get the LLC. Once you have that going, WeFunder basically walks you through all the legalities. They have a whole questionnaire and thing that you have to fill in on their website with a bunch of questions. So it's all pretty straightforward in that way. And then they file the Form C for you with the SEC, which is required for the equity crowdfunding. So they all the legalities they help take care of. So I think it's kind of amazing because you don't really have to worry too much in the sense that you don't have to like spend a lot of brain power on figuring this out. It's more like you start on Wefunder, see if you're getting interest. In my opinion, obviously start your LLC, and then once you start getting traction, talk with your Wefunder rep and let him walk you through everything, because it's all pretty straightforward. Because on their website, you'll have each tab will have questions and things you have to fill in. And everything's on there. Like you have to fill in risks of investing, which is something you have to do. You have to fill in, who's involved in this LLC, what's the percentage ownership. You have to fill in what the deal is with the investors. Most people, the deal that they do, equity crowdfunding, and what we do a lot, is basically 120% or 125%, somewhere around there, which means that investors get what they invested plus 20%, and then they're made whole. So if your film, makes 100K or whatever, and it was made on 70K or whatever it was, then they would get that money plus 20%. Then whatever's left over splits into net profits. And that's usually 50-50. Most people do on Wefunder. But again, it is completely up to you to set the terms. So I just say these terms because that's what most filmmakers do. It's what we do. It's what most of the campaigns that are on there do. So I wouldn't go much lower. Like I wouldn't, in my opinion, I wouldn't do like 110% and then like a 70-30 in your favor split. You know what I mean? I personally wouldn't do that, just because you're giving a worse deal than pretty much every project on there. Unless you have such a good project that it's worth doing that. If you have amazing, like an A-list person attached, and you already have a good amount of funding, then okay, maybe you can do a different deal. But it is up to you. I would just look at what everyone else is doing, so that you can compete with them. So that's what I would recommend. But in terms of everything, setting it up, it's pretty straightforward. So I wouldn't be scared of that at all. The
Are
part,
there
like
any
you
elements
mentioned,
from Sorry, are there any elements of that setup which you found to be the most challenging? So I run an equity crowdfunding campaign here in the UK for a company. It wasn't actually a film company, but a different startup.
yeah.
And one of the things that I found challenging is you had to support every single claim that you made with evidence. And sometimes I found that really difficult to do, especially when it was something really, really obvious, like our company does this. Well, you need to support that with evidence. It's like, how the hell do you do that? Like, this is just what we do. So I don't know, is there anything that could throw filmmakers off, from that point of view? And also, is there anything where you need lawyers or accountants to sign off or anything at that point? Or is it all things that you can fill out yourself as a filmmaker?
So yes, so there is some stuff that you need an accountant or CPA, but it depends on what level you're raising. There's different rules for, I believe, I forget what the number is right now, but I think, is it 100K or something? It's somewhere, some low number that it's almost like self-audited. So that's pretty easy. You don't have to do too much there. I think the next number, you have to get basically a CPA doing a review of your company, which is easy. Like it's not too expensive. I believe you can find someone to do it for about $500, I'd say. That's what we found. And then they basically kind of audit your company, but in the beginning, your company has nothing. You know what I mean? It's a new LLC. So it's super easy for them to do. It's just kind of you just have to have it for the rules. And then there isn't a more stringent thing CPA wise once you try to get to 1.23, I think 1.2 mil, somewhere around there. So there's different rules for each one, for each amount. But realistically, most people that are going to be using WeFunder are not going to be looking at 1.2 million. Like I think the most successful campaigns, most of them have been around 400K. The ones that are successful, there are exceptions. I have seen one that did 1.4 million for a film, but they had a huge audience. That was like Legion M, I believe, and they have a huge audience. So there are exceptions, but I'd say most successful campaigns are around that 200 to 400K mark. And realistically, I think most filmmakers, that's what they'd be looking for this type of thing.
Okay, interesting. And so with that, I'd love to dive into your first campaign and then your second campaign, and then we can talk a little bit about all the learnings from that for, for what your third one might be. So your
Yeah.
first campaign, you mentioned you raised a little bit over 100K, I think. Can you tell us a little bit about, okay, you set up that campaign. Maybe you can tell us very briefly about the project as well, and then how you went about marketing that campaign. How long was it? What kind of outreach did you do?
So yeah, so we raised 126K on that one, and that one we kind of spent, I think 3 months on. I think we spent 3 months on that one, but really 1 month heavily. I know in 1 month we emailed a lot. We did a lot of LinkedIn outreach, a lot of email outreach, took a lot of Zoom meetings. That's when we got most of our money, I would say. But I would say we probably spent 3 months on that one. And again, most of the outreach we did was through email and LinkedIn. And I'd say at the time, I think LinkedIn did better for us. Surprisingly, I thought email would do better, but LinkedIn for us did better. And we got more Zoom calls from there because, obviously the first goal is to get on a Zoom, because very rare that you'll have someone just invest from the message itself. I also think that's not good to do. So there are people that I've seen that sometimes pitch like, "Oh, do you want to invest in my movie?" type of thing from a first message, and I think your hit rate for that right now is super low. I think that's a terrible idea. I think a better idea is to try to just talk in what they're interested in and Zoom about it, and not even just try to get like investment from them. Even ask them like, is there anyone that you think would be interested in this, that I could talk to? So you try to get more Zooms, but yeah, you do end up taking a lot of meetings that sometimes don't lead to investments at all. So I think it's important to keep in mind that this does take a decent amount of time. It's definitely not something like you just throw it up on Wefunder and money comes in. It's definitely not like that. Plus, you need to get to 50K first to even show up on the main page on Wefunder. So Wefunder has each category, like film is a category on there. In the film category, you won't show up on the public page that everyone can see until you're at 50K. So you won't even get random people investing. Once you get 50K, you will though. Like we did get a bunch of people like investing $500, $1,000 that we didn't even talk to, and that just kind of invested in seeing it there when it was past the 50K mark. So it does happen. I think once you're past that 50K, more good things can happen. But I wouldn't count on a lot coming through without talking to people. But you will get small amounts coming in without talking to people. Um, and I
And can
think
you share? Do you know roughly the percentage split from that 123K on how many people you've spoken to who invested and how many people just came through Wefunder or through word of mouth?
um, like percentage wise, that's a good question, because it's a lot of reaching out, not even getting responses. You know what I mean? You got to. I think personally, I think if you're anywhere from 1 to 5%, you're doing very well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's pretty solid. I think expecting 10-20% or something, even responses, that usually doesn't happen. So if you get 1 out of 10 emails, them even responding to you, I think that's pretty solid. That's not bad at all. If you're doing better, then great, But if you're doing a lot less, like if you're getting like 1 out of 50 responding, then I think you do need to start looking at what you're doing. I think if you start getting that low that you're not even getting responses, then you need to tweak your pitch. Like you need to look at, okay, how am I emailing this? How am I LinkedIn messaging this? I think you do need to keep tweaking. But I
Yeah.
feel like, yeah, you want to shoot around the 1 to 5%. If I think if you're around that percentage, you're doing pretty solid. And I think at that point you can be like, okay, let's use this message and let's do more of it. You know what I mean? And I think, but I
Hmm.
think you want to be
And I
around that percentage.
Okay, and let's dive into the messages in just a second. But sorry, the question that I meant was, what percentage from that 123K that you raised came from people that you've reached out to? So, was that 100K and then you got
Yeah,
26K
yeah,
from
yeah.
just
I'd
random
say
investors and yeah,
I'd say 80%. I'd say 80%, 85% of that is from outreach. Because obviously we got
right,
some people that like would put 10K in or more, and all those people we definitely talk to because those are the ones that really
yeah,
move the needle. So I'd say the majority of it. So I'd say maybe 15-20% came from them just seeing it and just investing without us talking to them. So which to me is still it's not that's still a decent amount in my opinion from people that you just get from the platform. And again, what's really important is your pitch. So I want to talk a little bit about that. I think really prepping your pitch, having the right visuals, having a pitch video, which you need for WeFunder. So you need a pitch video. It can be like you or you and your producer or whoever it is talking to the camera and kind of telling you like why is this story important to you, like how are you guys going to go about distribution and marketing. You can include all of that in the video, but you definitely need, I think, visually also a good pitch. And I think so. What I learned from between the first and the second, and now going into the third, the first one we were very story focused. I'd say we were very focused on the creative, and we did have some stuff on what we were doing business wise, kind of towards the end of the pitch, but it wasn't our primary focus, and I think that did pretty solid. And because people liked the creative behind it. And then the second one, I got the idea of like, okay, let me make this like, and I had more business experience to add on to that, and I had a different setup that I thought was really good, which I still think is really good. But I went too much into the business side, in my opinion, and more too much into like, hey, this is why this financially and investment wise is good or better than other deals, better than other films, and why what we're doing X, Y, and Z. And I thought in my head, I was like, this is great. This is going to do better than other films because I'm actually showing a better path to potentially getting an ROI and being smarter with the marketing and distribution. I'm handling the sales, so we're not giving that percentage away to a sales agent. That's already 15-20% saved right there. So I thought, okay, this is a really great pitch. And when we ran the campaign, we did get good feedback on it, but we didn't get as much investment as the first one, even though I felt like the pitch was better in my eyes. But I think what I realized is that we didn't focus on the creative enough. There wasn't enough to grab them emotionally. And I realized that towards the end, I was like, oh, I didn't lean into like the emotion enough at all. And realistically, people that are going to invest in films, yes, you want ideally like you want a path to ROI, distribution, marketing. You want to know all that, but pretty much every film investor now does know that this is a risky investment. Pretty much everyone knows that. So, but they want to be emotionally invested in the story. I do think a lot of investors, at least for WeFunder, they want to feel like this is a story that I want told. I want to see this. You know what I mean? Like, I think that is huge. And I think I underestimated that in the second campaign, which we did do well in the first campaign. So now in this third campaign, I have a way bigger focus on the story, the creative, us as the team, and why this is important to us and why we're the team to tell this story. And I think this campaign is going to
yeah,
do much better because of that, because it's going to be more emotional. And I think if you're in film, honestly, and it's kind of dumb that I made that mistake, but you get in your head a little bit and what you think is going to work. But honestly, making it as emotionally engaging and grabbing people emotionally first, and then backing it up with this is what we're doing business wise, this is how we're doing it distribution wise, so that you also show like why you're being smart with getting them an ROI. But yeah, I think emotionally you have to do it first. You need to do that. I think at the end, everyone that goes into film or wants to invest in film, they're not doing it to have the safest investment. Then they would just invest in real estate or stocks or something that's much safer than this. So I think that's important to keep in mind. And I think I'd say, I guess the audience could learn from me, from the mistake that I made. Don't lead with the business stuff. Have it in there, and definitely have a very good plan, because they will ask you about this. They will like ask you very detailed questions. So don't just say, we're going to get a distributor and then we're going to make all the money back. Better be more detailed than that. But have that be the second half of your pitch. Lead with the emotion, the story, grab them with, this is awesome, this is a cool project, and then back it up with all the business stuff that's like, and this is how we're making it as safe as we can make it, knowing that film is risky, and knowing how we can mitigate some of these risks and give it the highest chance to succeed. So I think that would be my huge piece of advice: is tell your story in the most engaging way, and that's the most exciting emotionally. And again, something that filmmakers are already good at. So it's actually, I made that mistake. So, but don't make my mistake, and use your filmmaking experience to craft a really good story, because that's what people will invest in, and in you. You're part of the story too. So don't, not just the
That's
creative,
really
also
interesting.
you as the filmmaker. Why do they need to invest in you especially?
And is that an issue that you feel like you had on the second campaign on the crowdfunding page, or on the pitch calls with the investors, or both?
I'd say both. I'd say definitely more on the page, because I feel like on the call I did get way more into the creative. But look, I also think maybe the format wasn't great. I made that more of a slate pitch, so it had more than one project on it that they're investing. Which, business wise, I think it's a way better investment than one single film, because your risk is spread out and you're almost investing in the whole company in a way. So I think it makes a lot of sense business wise. I still think it's a good idea. But the problem with it is, when you have multiple projects, it's really hard to hone in on one story specifically. So then you're really leaning on the business stuff and just yourself. So there's not a focus there. There's not one thing you're focused on. Even audience wise, it was much harder to target the right audience for it than now. When I make this tennis thing, I'm going to be able to focus on a tennis audience, which is so much easier to target, and know how I want to message that. So I have high hopes for this next campaign. That is the one we're trying to get to 200-300K. And I just think we're just going to have a much cleaner campaign, more focused campaign, and it's going to hit these things that I'm talking about. So yeah, I'd say the audience keep track of this next one that we're doing, and hopefully everything that I'm saying works out really well.
That's really interesting. And I did want to ask you about the fact that the first campaign was just one film, and the second one was a slate of four films. And if you have any advice for people who would be looking to do a slate of films rather than one. And I see that one of your advice you just gave is perhaps don't do that, do one film. The reason why I ask about it is, in the UK, it is extremely beneficial to invest in a production company that has long-term potential, rather than one film. We have this SEIS scheme over here, which essentially means that up to £250,000, investors can get 50% off of their tax,
Mhm.
essentially, for the investment that they make if they invest in a long-term company. But they can't invest in one single film. It has to be a production company that's making a slate of multiple films over a longer period of time, and then they can get a 50% tax break from what they invest, which is huge.
That's huge. Yeah.
So for all of those people in the UK who really want to do that, is there any advice that you can give on how you would put together this slate of films? Would you recommend actually doing four completely different films with genres, or perhaps a slate of four horror films, or a sequels already put
Yeah.
together, or any advice on that? Giving your gut feeling after the last campaign.
I mean, look, knowing that, I mean, that's obviously for the UK. That's a huge benefit. We don't have anything like that here. Yeah, I think in the UK that makes way more sense. It makes me think I should have raised money there. But I think that makes a lot more sense. But like you're saying too, it's like they're investing in the company. There is a there is an idea that I maybe instead of having created the slate, what I did, maybe letting them invest in the company. I did have a lot of people asking me about that when I was running that campaign, if they could invest in the company at the time. And I'm still not sure if I want to do that, but like at the time I didn't want to do that, because I wanted to keep the actual LLC and the actual company fully in my control, and not give a percentage of that away. But I think that is more attractive, because, like you said, A, you have your tax benefits there, but B, you're also invested long term in the company. There's more in that way revenue potential. Like if this company ever sells, then they would get paid back. If you ever get that big that you give out shares, there's more ways for them to make more money, I would say. So I think in that way, especially in the UK, investing in a company has probably the biggest potential. Obviously it's a way longer road, because if you invest in a company, it's not like next year you're making a ton of money. It's like you're really hoping that the company turns into a Neon or something huge, and then like in 7-8 years, all of a sudden you make a lot of money from it. And that's really just startup investing. You know what I mean? So I do think there is value in that, but you have to also know if you want to do that, because once you're giving a percentage of your company away, you can't really go back on that, or not easily, at least. I mean, I guess you could buy them out, but it's difficult to go back. Um, so you have to know that, and you also have more people that will be more involved in a way. So you got to weigh the pros and cons. I think, yes, if I was in the UK, knowing those tax benefits, and knowing what I learned from the slate investing and how many people asked me to invest in the company instead, I would then do that. If I'm thinking of a slate over in the UK, I would definitely have it be the company. Then I think it's more attractive for investors anyway, and with your tax benefits, it's like a no-brainer. So I would do that. In terms of slate, I would have variety in there somewhat. You know what I mean? But you still want to have it's tricky, because you don't want to go like horror, comedy, action thriller. You know what I mean? You don't want to just be all over the place, because now you have no brand. You know what I mean? You have no,
Yeah.
like, what's your point of view? Like what's different about you? Like if we think of super successful companies like A24, we know what that is. We know what their brand is. Like if you think of an A24 film, everyone knows what type of film. It can be different genres, but in general what type of film that is. So I think you can do different genres, and I would recommend that. Like, I wouldn't just make all dramas. That would probably not be a great idea unless you have a unique hook. Um, Whereas if you have all horrors, I guess that could be attractive sales wise. But you can have different genres. I think you need to figure out what is your brand, like what is unique about your projects, like, and I think as a company, you're not going to lean in, at least from my experience from this campaign, you're not going to lean in as much in just your individual films, especially if they're investing in your company. You got to lean in. The emotional part needs to be leaning into your story, your brand. What's different about us? Why are we different? What are we going to do better? Lean into that really hard, because in a company, they're definitely mostly investing in you. It's like, yeah, the projects are great, and hopefully those are all good, and you have a good plan for each one of those, and all that. But in a company, they're definitely investing in you. So you're the main driver there. So you need to be the one that they invest in, and you need to be the good bet. Because if you have a couple of different genres, they're not investing in necessarily the creative, because they're different genres. So an investor's not going to be like, I just love these all four stories. You're probably not going to find an investor that loves every story equally of your slate. So they might like one or two of those projects. So that's not going to be the main selling point there. That's what individual film campaigns are for. So you need to really build your story and what's unique about you. And like for me, like just to give an example, I guess, and how I would sell it. is for me, I would lean into my multiculturalism in the sense that I grew up in two different countries. I grew up in 7 countries growing up. I grew up in Belgium. I am Belgium. I'm also American, and I've been here for the last 15 years. So I would lean into all that. That I want to make films that do well internationally, that employ people from different cultures internationally. That's one thing that's different. I would lean into my diverse background as a strength. I would, because I worked in different businesses, so I'm not just a film guy. I've done sales, I've done social media, so I would lean into that and be like, this is what I'm bringing that other people don't have. You know what I mean? And I'm doing this
Yep.
X, Y, and Z. So I would figure out what are my strengths, what is unique about me, and then put that into a story of how this will be different. You know what I mean? And I think that's the only way to differentiate the company. I don't think it's with the projects as much. The projects matter, and they're going to look at those, because if they're all like not things that they're interested in, then they probably still won't invest. But I think they do invest in the person primarily, because this is a super long-term play. If they're investing in the
Yep.
company, they're probably thinking this can be 5 years, 6 years, 7 years before this pays off. Whereas a film, you can invest in solely the film, and maybe you're thinking 2 years, 3 years. You know what I mean? But you should be. That's pretty much the timeline. You'll know everything, and if you're making money back and how much, and then your association with that person could be over. You know what I mean? So you could invest in one project and love the project, and you don't have to kind of like marry that person. You know what I mean? So it's a little bit a shorter term thing. Whereas if you're investing in a company, you're really betting on this person, because you have to bet that this person is going to have the drive, the tenacity to keep this going for 5, 6, 7 years, that they're going to have the willpower to bring this forward, and they're going to work more than anyone's going to work on it, because it's a long term play. So I think, yeah, in the UK, if you're trying to build a company that they invest in, which sounds like an awesome idea over there with the tax benefits, for the investors. So that is really cool and unique over there. But really build your brand and know what type of film company you're trying to build. So I think, what's your taste? What are you trying to build? Are you trying to do more art house films? Are you doing commercial rom-coms? Are you doing, horrors, smart horrors, whatever? But like, have something. Don't just be like, we're doing everything. You know what I mean? That's probably
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
going to do great. So I would suggest leaning into it, and you'll automatically do that, because I don't, like, for you, for example, I'm sure you have films and genres that you lean towards way more. Automatically your taste will
Yep.
be evident, and I would just lean into your taste. Don't try to make a
Yeah.
decision there that's like what you think people want. Just lean into your taste, because that's unique.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I'd like to, because we spoke a little bit about messaging people, and then calls that you might have with private investors, and I'd like to dive into that a little bit deeper. So can you tell us, on the last 2 campaigns that you've done, what are the kind of messages that you sent out on LinkedIn, if it's a cold message, that you found that works? I mean, are you telling people right away about the equity crowdfunding campaign? Are you just saying hello? Are you framing that first call as a pitch call, or is it just a get to know you call? So can you talk a little bit about the message, and then also what can filmmakers expect from the actual call with the investors themselves? If you can give any insights on that as well, that would be great.
So I would say, with the messages, you're constantly going to be tweaking that and testing that, because let's say I give you a message right now, which I will, but like, and then all of a sudden a lot of people are using that message, so it's not going to work anymore. You know what I mean? So like, or it's going to work a little bit less. You're going to have to keep tweaking it, and I've tweaked every campaign, and I've tried different messages with mixed success. Some work terribly, and some worked better than I expected. So I think I'm always tweaking those. I've done a mix. I have done messages where I'm a little bit more direct, where I'm like, okay, this is what we're about. This is what we're kind of looking for. This is what the campaign is. Though those ones did okay, they didn't do great. Like, they did do good in the sense that we sometimes had people investing just off that message, but it was pretty low percentage. And we definitely got less Zoom calls from that. So I would say maybe we got more quicker small wins in terms of small investors, like $500, $1,000 maybe. But we got less Zoom calls. So to me, that probably means we missed out on bigger amounts, because usually the bigger amounts are off making calls. And then I've had simple messages where it's literally something like, hey, and I personalize it. Hey, I saw that you, and like, depending where I found them, like, let's say I found that they invested somewhere else before. I would say like, hey, I saw that you invested in X. It seems like, you have an interest in that. We're doing this. I'm just trying to get kind of an idea of what investors think about when they're thinking of investing. And then it's set up more like I'm just trying to find information, and I'm not necessarily trying to sell them on the call then either. You know what I mean? Because then you don't want to do a bait and switch either. You know what I mean? So I'm not trying to sell them on the call then. If I do it, then I actually am asking them questions. What I will do then is I'll ask them if they know someone that I can talk to that could potentially invest or would be interested in investing. I personally think those type of messages are better, but they take longer. So towards the end of our campaign, when I was getting more impatient but also a little tired, because you're doing this already for a long time, and I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to start busting out messages with the campaign in there and just hope for the little small ones right now. That's when I switched to that. But I think initially you should take a lot, just try to get lots of calls, just getting in their head. And initially you have to do that anyway, because you probably don't know when you're starting out what they're looking for, what's important to them. And I think if you speak to 10 investors that have invested in something before, you will have a really good idea on what language they use and what terms and things are the most important. And you'll start seeing overlap. Like, one thing that popped up a lot when I spoke to people was how bad communication was for a lot of filmmakers with their investors. So that's something that popped up a lot, because they wanted to feel involved and they wanted to be updated. And honestly, it makes sense. I think if they're investing in a film, part of the fun is being involved with the film. That doesn't mean you're giving creative control or anything like that. We're pretty adamant about keeping creative control, and I'm pretty upfront about that. But I am very open to keeping them updated. I do try to keep them updated as much as I can with new developments, new attachments, what distributors we're finding, everything. You want to treat them as members of your team, and obviously, like, give perks too. Like, I give perks for higher end investors that want to invest more, that they can come visit on set for a day. Things like that you do. So I think I would kind of put it around experiences as much as possible. If you can get people involved and part of the team and bring them to set, I think that's the way to do it. And same with the messaging. If you can approach them in a way where it's like, I'm not just mass messaging 1,000 people, and I've sent those type of messages too, by the way. That's why I know which ones don't do well and which ones do well. And I get it. I get the appeal to that. Sometimes you start, if you're towards the end of your campaign, maybe you're getting a little burned out, so you just start copy pasting, and but it's not good. It's not good. So ideally, like, you don't do that, and you try to just actually frame your messages as you're trying to learn about them. The more you can personalize these messages, the better. I think on LinkedIn, it's easier now in the sense that it doesn't allow you to send that many messages anymore, because they have a lot of spam filters on LinkedIn now. So I think you can only, I think you can send like 25 new connection requests per day. So that's not a lot. It used to be like, 3 years ago, I could send out 100 to 200 a day. So you could do way more. So your numbers are way lower now, which is good and bad. But the good is, kind of forces you to be way more personalized, because you only have 25 a day. So you might as well go way more personalized, and which will probably lead to more success. So when I say personalized, I don't mean just put their name. That's like the minimum. I think ideally you're looking through their LinkedIn profile and finding something that is either relevant to you or relevant to the film or something like that, or something that's at least grabs your eye, and that you can personalize it a little bit more, that shows that you put in some extra effort. I think that goes a long way, because even when I send out mass messages and mass emails, I think it's very obvious to them and to everyone that you're just messaging a lot of people and you don't even know anything about this person. So I think if you can, I would go very personalized and do less people. And that's also what again, to learn from me and the mistakes that I made, I've done a mix of those, and always it doesn't end up well just mass messaging. So I think even this next campaign, I'm going to focus on the numbers being way lower quantity wise, but be way higher on personalization, higher on follow up as well. Really important follow up, not just sending one message and then just moving on to the next person. So I think that's my plan,
Yep.
to keep it, to create a better list as well in terms of who I'm targeting, not just everyone that potentially has money, instead of targeting people that I think will be good fits. And again, if you have a niche audience like this tennis one, my first goal will be making a list of literally everyone that, obviously has a title or an investor or something that I know that they actually can invest, and then that they have an interest in tennis, and have played tennis, and you can look that up, like, you with social media and internet and all that, it's so much easier to personalize things. It just takes more effort, but I think that would be my goal in this
Yep.
next campaign, and also what I would recommend. And just remember, it's not about hitting 1,000. If you hit 1,000 with no personalization, you're probably barely going to get a response. Maybe you just hit 100, but you're super personalized, and you get one person, two persons that really believe in you, and now they're putting in a lot more money. And I think that's a good thing for filmmakers to remember. You don't need 200, 300 investors. I mean, that's nice, that you can get there that way too. But realistically, if you have 5 or 10 investors that put in a serious amount of money, you're there.
Yep. I mean, that's all really interesting. And can you talk a little bit about what filmmakers can expect on that initial call, on that initial Zoom that they got on with the investors? Did you find that there was a pretty big range of the type of people that you were talking to, or did you find that they're mainly similar? I mean, did you have some people who want to talk for 2 hours, some people who want a quick 10-minute call? Did you have some
Yeah.
people who are very much focused on business, some people very much focused on the creative? Can you talk a little bit about, how big the range was and what, generally speaking, what filmmakers can expect?
Um, I'd say more similar than different for sure. I'd say most of the phone calls were max 30 minutes. They were relatively quick. I did occasionally have one that went like long, like you said, where it was just like a lot of rambling, and I've definitely also been had times happen where all of a sudden they start pitching their own project, and so then that's not ideal. But it so I've had a mix of things, but I'd say most are within 30 minutes, and it's pretty quick. And I did find that a lot, especially the more business type of people, they're pretty direct and pretty quick. So they're like they on the calls you should expect way more about the distribution, marketing, business plan than the creative. The creative is probably in your pitch deck and in your on your website, and that's probably what helps get them on the call or gets them interested. um, there's not usually as much talk about the creative on the call. There is a little bit, but they're way more asking questions about the business on the call. So on the call, you should expect a lot of questions around that. They will ask you like, okay, what's the timeline? You know what I mean? When would you go into production? When would you finish post? When would you start distribution? What is the plan with distribution? Festivals, all that type of thing. So I think that is important. And for me, I mean, look, for me, that's strength. I love doing these calls in that way, because I feel like personally, once I'm on the call, I'm 80-90% sure I'm going to get a investment. I don't know how much, but I feel 80-90% sure I'm going to get the investment, because usually when I've spoken to people, they have said like, oh, this is way more concrete and more clear than most filmmakers I speak to, because unfortunately most filmmakers, they don't know how to answer some of these questions, or they haven't thought about it, or they haven't prepped it enough. So they kind of spin in circles, and it's really obvious to these type of people if you don't have an actual plan. So if you're staying like, well, our plan is, we're gonna finish the film, and then we're going to bring it to festivals, and we're hoping to get into Sundance, and then get a distribution deal from that. It's like, oh, okay, well, so you have no plan. You know what I mean? That's not a plan. You know what I mean? Because your chances, you can get into those festivals, sure, but your chances of getting in that are like 0.5%. That doesn't mean don't go for it. Go for it, but like be realistic with the investors and be like, these are the ones we're shooting for. If we don't get into those, these are the next ones we're shooting for. And then this is our distribution plan, regardless of the festivals. And then even with self distribution, I always say, like, even if no distributor wants to do a theatrical run for our film, we are doing a theatrical run, no matter what. So I tell them we're doing a theatrical run. I've worked in that. I've called theatricals, theaters, and as a theatrical booker. So I literally tell them, like, if the distributors aren't going to do it, and a lot of them are risk averse to that lately, then I'm doing it. I'll call every single theater in America and get us an indie run that we at least have a decent theatrical run, whatever that looks like. But we will be in theaters.
Okay, well, that's super interesting as well. And can you tell me a little bit about, so on the equity crowdfunding platforms, you usually have a lead investor. Can you talk a little bit about what that is? Do you bring that person on board before you launch the crowdfunding campaign? Is that just the person who invests the most, or what is that, and how does that work?
It can be anything you want, really. I think it is a good idea sometimes to have an investor that already believes in you, and you trust, because in a lot of ways they're also the mouthpiece for the other investors in that way. But it can be anyone. It also doesn't even, like, it's not even about the amount. Like, a lot of people usually do choose the person that's invested the biggest amount, which makes sense, or is there the earliest with the biggest amount. But I've also seen people have the lead investor be someone that wasn't the biggest amount. Like, I've seen people choose people that invested $4,000 or $5,000, and other people invested more than that, and that was the lead investor. So you might also want to go with someone that has a lot of experience. For example, like, maybe you get an investor that's like an equity investor into big companies, and they invested in all these startups that have been successful and anything. And so whatever amount they invest in your film, maybe you want to make them the lead investor, because it shows trust, that this guy trusts to invest in you. So now all of a sudden it's like, well, if he's doing it, who's like a professional investor that invests in all these company, and he believes in them, maybe I should look into this a little bit more seriously because I trust his taste. So ideally, if you have someone like that, which is, that's you don't always have that. But if you do get someone that has kind of like that trust built in, where they have either invested in a lot of things and have like a public profile in that way, then definitely pick those. That's definitely better than someone who's it's their first investment, because to me it shows more trust that, oh, they've chosen all these things to invest in that have done pretty well, or that are like actual companies, and then they chose to invest in me as well. I think that says a lot. And then you
Yeah.
also, ideally you choose someone that also is, because you can put statements on Wefunder when you invest. So you also want to choose someone that ideally in tandem you talk about what they're going to write. You know what I mean? But that writes a nice paragraph that serves as an additional selling point.
Okay, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Do you think that, I mean, first of all, did a lot of the people from your first campaign also invest in your second campaign? And are you hoping that the people from the first two campaigns will invest in the third one? Or have you found that you sort of have to go out and find new investors each time?
I'd say a couple, but I wouldn't say the primary, no, because don't forget, like, for us, it's like we have the one in post right now. Those investors need to wait until that goes into distribution. Now, I do think they make their money back and this film does well, then yes, I do believe that a lot of them would reinvest, because it is rare that a film makes them their money back. That they've all said that. So if you're able to do that, you already stick out. So that is my goal, because to me, I'm like, I want to do really well, so that and I tell them that on the phone too, like I do want to do really well so that you reinvest, and ideally invest even more next time. So I
Yeah.
do think like trying to do as good as possible, and making their money back is important, because then you will get more reinvestments. So I do believe when that happens, we will have more of that. But right now, not yet, because we have that one in post and it's not in distribution yet. So there's obviously no revenue yet.
Yeah.
So not a lot of that. We had a couple that did reinvest. Um, but I know someone else that's a friend of mine, and she raised a lot on Wefunder, and she did have a lot of reinvestors even before selling the first
Mhm.
one. So it does happen. I think, again, it depends also for this type of thing on the film. Like the people that invest in the first film, if you're doing a different genre, a different story in the second one, maybe a lot of those won't be interested in that, because maybe they're more horror people or rom-com people, and now you're making the opposite or something different, and they're not as interested in that. So I think I don't think you can count on that. I think that's a nice bonus, and obviously I think the better you do for your investors, the more your investments grow in the future. So it's definitely in your best interest to also make sure the movie does well, to again have a
Sure.
longer career where people invest. But yeah, that's what I would say about that. I think you can't count on that, and I think you are doing a lot of, in general, new investors a lot of times.
Okay. And aside from reaching out to those new investors through LinkedIn, and so I'm guessing, you reached out to you found those people for a variety of different, you looked on IMDb Pro for films that are similar to those. You looked on Wefunder. You can look at the different people who invested on those, and you find all of those people who could be interested, and you do LinkedIn searches and you message them. Outside of that, were there other different marketing strategies that you have? Did you run any paid ads to try and get investors? Did you, did you go to any in-person events to try and talk to people face to face? Were there any other marketing avenues that you explored?
So I did try paid ads. I didn't have much success with paid ads, unfortunately. But again, I did only do that on this last campaign, and like we talked about, I don't feel like that was a very focused niche. I am going to try it again with this tennis one, because I do feel like that's a way easier ad target. So I have higher hopes for that. So I think if you have a very good niche that you can target, not just indie film investors, I think that's way too broad. But if you can like do tennis or some kind of niche like that, then I could see more success happening there. But look, your ads are difficult, I think, because those prices have gone up, especially for U.S. European investors. Those ads are usually higher priced than other countries, but those are also the countries that you need for investing. So I think you need to be really targeted, and you have to have enough budget set aside, because you're probably going to, in the beginning, waste some money while you're testing it. So I would start with lower money, even if it's, I don't know, 5, 10, $15 a day max, and test it out. And then once you start seeing some success, then increase the budget. But again, it's like the messaging. It's you have to test a lot. You have to do a lot of creative. It's its own thing. I didn't have success with it yet. I am going to try it again on this new campaign, because I still do think there is a world where it can do really well. And I hope this tennis niche will be a lot easier to target, which it should be. So I did try that. I did, marketing wise. I didn't do in person really. I do have I have a film festival coming up for something else in September that I'm going to. So for sure I'm pitching it there. So I will be pitching it, and I do talk about it. But I do find that in film festivals, it is primarily filmmakers that are all kind of doing the same thing. Um, you can meet investors for sure, but it's really hard to sometimes know or even find the investors, because it's not like they're announcing themselves. You know what I mean? So I think that's a little bit hard to count on, but I think it can work as well. Obviously, if you do meet people in person that can invest, that is the strongest. I think you just have the most trust there. But that's not something that I've focused on too much. I focus primarily on the ads and the outreach, and honestly the outreach, because you're not spending money on that, because you don't want to spend a bunch of money on ads and all of a sudden realize you're breaking even after investments, or worse. Whereas outreach, you're always being positive, because the only thing you're losing is your time. But at least it's not like, oh, I'm negative 500, negative $1,000 right now, because this isn't working. It's like your worst case is that you're at zero. So I do think the outreach
Yeah.
is the most important to start with, and I would start the initial 30 to 50K. I would start that way before I would start running ads, because I personally, I wouldn't want to start a campaign at zero and be like negative $5,000 to start. I think that would suck. So I would like to get
Yeah.
some money in and then do it.
Yeah, that negative number is never a good thing psychologically when you're
No.
fundraising. And on that note, do you think it's worth for filmmakers to reach out to investors, especially to investors they haven't met, right? Because obviously, if they know people, they can start talking to them about the campaign before it launches. But for when you're doing that cold outreach on LinkedIn, do you think it's worth reaching out to people before you even launch the equity crowdfunding campaign? And how important is it to have a good first couple of days? Because if you're launching a rewards based Kickstarter campaign, for example, it's really important to have a very, very strong couple of days. Is it the same with equity, or with equity crowdfunding? Is it like you launch, you've got a longer period of time and you can build up momentum
Yeah,
later down the line?
I wouldn't worry too much about, I need all my investments in the first week type of thing. Um, I don't find much of it, doesn't really matter that much on Wefunder. What matters is getting to that 50K mark. It doesn't necessarily matter how quickly that goes. But getting to that 50K mark gets you, like I said, on the homepage, but it also gets Wefunder sending out an email to everyone that's on Wefunder. So you also get an email with your campaign on there, which you also usually get some investments from. So I think that's the big one for sure. But I
Mhm.
wouldn't worry about like, oh, I need all this money coming in the first week. You actually end up getting a majority of your money, I'd say the last 2, 3 weeks of your campaign. So I'm even playing around, and this is something that I think they can play around with too. I think I'd rather do two, maybe even three shorter campaigns during a year that are like 2, 3 month campaigns, instead of, because you have the option to do longer ones, instead of just doing one 6, 7 month campaign that's longer. I think I would rather split it up and have 2, 3 month campaigns going in separate times during the day, because you do get most of your funding towards the tail end of your campaign. Because it makes sense. Once the campaign's closing, people that were kind of on the fence, or at least considering it, they're like, oh, well, I only have a week left now. I guess I should do it now. And a lot of people do wait till the
Yeah.
last moment type of thing. So I would do that. And I think it's better energy wise. I think you can go hard 2, 3 months, and then you're gonna probably want a little break. You know what I mean? And then maybe you do the second half of it, like, or new campaign 2, 3 months later. You know what I mean? I think you're gonna have more
Yeah.
success with that, and do it more sustainably than doing one 6 month campaign. And I've done both. I've done a shorter campaign and a longer campaign. The shorter campaign was better for sure. Like that was for
Yeah.
sure better. But then, from your first question, to reach out to investors and people before you start your campaign, yeah, ideally, that's the best. I think building that up is your highest chance. I mean, even now, I'm not running any campaigns right now for the like past month and a half or whatever. But I'm still on LinkedIn. I'm still posting about the film. I'm still posting about marketing and distribution. I post like 3 times a week. I get a decent amount of engagement there. I message with people, and I think doing that with investors or potential investors and building a relationship that's not just asking, is huge. Like, if you can showcase your expertise, your taste, your brand, whatever, and you're building this up, and then you go back again with, now I'm raising. That's a way stronger thing, because now there's trust. So that's also why I've been doing that. I've been posting on LinkedIn now for the last almost year, 6, 7 months, 3 times a week. And I've grown quite a lot in that time. So to me, I'm like, okay, this is great, because now not all of them are investors. There's also a lot of filmmakers. But now when I start raising again, I do feel like, okay, there's going to be a lot of people that are following me that already know me, that already know what, like, kind of what I'm doing on sales and distribution. They like what I'm saying. So now there's like some trust there. But yeah, if you can add on like talking to investors already in person or talking on the phone before you're even asking for an investment, that's huge, because now that also differentiates you. Most people are not doing that because they don't want to put the extra effort of something that pays off down the line. They want it to pay off right now. So I think the more
Yeah.
patient you can be, and being long term, building relationships. And look, that's hard. It's hard for me too, because you're a filmmaker, and sometimes you're just like, I want to get my funding and I want to get filming, and so it is hard to sometimes have the patience to build that long-term relationship. But I do think that's the only way to like really make it successful. So
Yeah.
I think, yes, do that, start already. Like even now, any filmmaker listening now, it's like, even if you're not sure about doing a Wefunder or equity crowdfunding, or maybe you're still writing the script right now, you know what I mean? Is like, I would already start with all this. I would start with going on LinkedIn, Instagram, whichever. I would start with the one you're most comfortable with. I like LinkedIn because I do think there's more investors on there. And
Yeah.
and start posting your ideas of the industry, start posting your ideas of your films, and your story, and even if you're not getting traction initially, just do it consistently, and you will get traction eventually. And again, remember, you don't need 500 people to like your post. If you have 2 people and they happen to be investors, that's all you need. So I think it's cool to remember that for a filmmaker, you don't need a large audience. You just need just 1 or 2 of those right people to find you, or you talk to them, and that all of a sudden moves your project forward a lot. So I think that's cool. So I think
Yeah.
for filmmakers, I think it's a no-brainer to build this up as soon as you can. Like I would do it right away before even thinking of raising.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's super useful advice there as well. I'm conscious of time, but I'm just wondering if there are any final pieces of advice or words of wisdom that you can share with filmmakers about equity crowdfunding. If you feel like there's anything else that we haven't covered here that could be good little, nuggets of information.
Um, I I think the most important thing right now, because there have been more people that have started doing equity crowd investing for their films. I'm sure you've seen it too. So a lot more people are open to that, have tried it. So there's definitely, it's a little bit more saturated than it was like 4 years ago, let's say. You know what I mean? So there's more competition, and there's also been more investors that have gotten burned by filmmakers. That I did notice that this last round. I did talk to some filmmakers that did get burned by a couple of filmmakers that didn't never got really repaid, didn't make any money to film, or they never communicated. That's not good. That hurts you too. You know what I mean? So I do
Yeah.
think moving forward, to kind of stick out, and I do think what I'm saying about the building your own brand, and building you on social media, on LinkedIn, is going to be essential, because I think the only way to stick out is to have more built-in trust, and the only way to build that is not going to be through cold emailing and cold LinkedIn messaging. That's one path of raising, but it's definitely the more difficult one. I think it is about, can you consistently post on LinkedIn, for example, or social media, or reach out to people just to talk, and do that for a year. And I think you'll be much further ahead than pretty much everyone, because almost no one else has the patience to do that. And that's going to be such a differentiator. And I think from an investor standpoint, if you do that, you're going to stick out in their mind, because you're going to be the guy that values the relationship first, and isn't just there asking for money. And I think that will actually put you above other people and have them invest in you over someone else, because they know how much effort you did in building a relationship, posting about this stuff for a year before you even asked for a dollar. Then then to me, I'm like, oh, you're going to be the easy favorite over everyone. So I think that is the
Mm.
future, and it also something I'm working on as well, and I've been doing now. I think you need to figure out ways like that to why are you the choice above these other filmmakers?
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, Greg, thank you so much. This has been really, really incredibly useful. I think, yeah, thank you for sharing your experience so honestly and sharing all of the advice and things that you feel like you've done right, and the things that you want to improve, because I think that kind of information is just so useful for everyone who will be going through this the first time. So yeah, once again, just thank you so much for coming on and for sharing all of this information.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on. And I'll see, like, anyone can follow me on Instagram, or if they're on LinkedIn. Everything's pretty much under Greg Bekkers. Same for my YouTube and stuff. And I post quite a lot and make videos a lot. So a lot of free information that I basically kind of give away in that way. So because I do feel like there's a lot of gatekeeping in the industry in general. So obviously
Yeah.
follow or sign up for my newsletter or whatever. Because my newsletter, I share a lot of behind the scenes things, and I plan on sharing also obviously things that I'm doing wrong, and things that I feel like I could have done better, or things that I did well. But I think that's important. I think it's important for me to share with people, like, hey, this is what I think I did terribly, and what I can do a lot
Yeah.
better, and why this can do a lot better. Because I think sometimes you learn way more from people's mistakes than just hearing them talk about, like, oh yeah, I reached out to 100 people and got 100K. It's like, yeah, that's cool and all, but like, what did you find that did not work at all, and what did work really well? Like, and seeing the difference there and
Yeah.
having someone share that, I think is important, because I think sometimes people get you lose a little bit of, not hope's not the right word, but you get a little bit like, this is really hard, and it is really hard. You know what I mean? And I think it's important for other people to share more honestly the process, and that it is
Yeah.
really hard, and that there are a lot of ups and downs with this. But I think that's why, like I said from the beginning, if you believe in your project, in your film, and what you're doing, that can carry you through, because you're going to have definitely ups and downs. Like, even me, like, having some minor success with this, with these raises, and I still think I can do way better. It's like, yeah, there are definitely times where I'm like, damn, this is not moving forward at all right now. What is going on? And where you get frustrated. And that's the times where sometimes people will quit. You know what I mean? And it's natural to feel
Yeah.
that. Like, I felt that before. I'm like, oh damn, I want to take a break from this. But I think those are the times where it's just try to stay on process and be like, okay, this can change at any moment. And honestly, find community. You know what I mean? Find other filmmakers, find other people that are doing this, because there's nothing better than talking to other filmmakers that are struggling with the same stuff, where you feel like, oh, okay, we're all doing this. That feels a lot better than when you feel
Yeah.
like you're all alone. So I think, yeah, just keep that in mind. Find community. I think it's really important, because it's not easy, but it's definitely possible, I think.
Absolutely, and I can confirm I've been following you on LinkedIn for a while, so I can, I can definitely confirm that you share a lot of valuable info in there, and I'll put some of the links to your profiles and so on in the notes below. So for anyone listening, you can access them on there. But yeah,
Appreciate
Greg, once again, thank you so much for joining me here today for for this conversation and for sharing all of this information.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.